Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
A Time for True Show is sponsored by the Office of Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, a periodontal, dental implant and laser specialist in New York City, for over 40 years. Dr. Fialkoff was honored by the International College of Dentists and Pierre Fauchard, and received the Presidential Lifetime Humanitarian Honor from the White House. Call us at 718-229-3838.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome back to A Time for True Show. It's a pleasure to have us with us again, and I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff. We're into 2023, and tonight's show is something that you're going to find very useful. Because, you know, so many times in this modern society, there are different stresses that we encounter. Things that are unknown that happen, and we're not prepared for them. And then we're scurrying, trying to find an answer. So the show today will deal with those things that are happening in today's fast-paced world, with the internet, with links, with social media, and the unfortunate happenings of ID theft and somebody hacking in. And the other circumstances that hit and are very stress-provoking when you have something happen legally, and or you're looking to defend something, one of your rights, and you're wondering, what can I do about this? So today's show, we're very lucky, and engineer, if you put his pictures up on the screen, to have with us today Brian Etta. There you see him. If you go back to that slide, Brian is a legal services consultant, an employee benefits consultant, and an identity theft and cybersecurity advisor with PPLSI, a veteran of the insurance industry who's worked to help the underserved in the metro New York area. Mr. Etta helps individuals with landlord-tenant issues, will creation, simple moving violations, very stressful identity theft, document review and creation, and really sometimes just some very simple thing like the ability to have an attorney to talk to. And amazingly, all for less than $1 a day. He notes that PPSLI was founded by Harlan Stonecipher, who had to spend his personal savings to defend himself in a civil suit following an automobile accident that wasn't even his fault in 1972. Go to the next slide, engineer. PPLSI's mission is to ensure that everyone, regardless of gender, race, sexual orientation, education, social status, or personal wealth or lack of, deserve a secure life and just treatment under the law. There you see the accident that he had in 1972 and what led to the founding of the company. For 50 years, that mission has been forwarded, constantly evolving to keep up with changing technology and the needs of our country. Mr. Etta works with individuals, with families, small businesses, and his goal is to protect them with what he says is the legal shield and the ID shield protection plans. His mantra is that no one should be denied access to legal services or identity protection, that those are basic rights and necessities of every American citizen. And we're very lucky, and I want to bid a warm welcome. An engineer, let's bring him up on the screen. Welcome, Mr. Brian Etta, to a Time for Truth show. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Fialkoff. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and I want to ask you, when you're a young man, you know, I see how much you do for people. What were your dreams?
Well, it's interesting because when I remember at 6 years old, my father asked me the same question, and I said I wanted to be an astronaut. And most people, they actually change things over the course of their lives. I actually kind of got a little bit far with it. I went to Rutgers and I studied aerospace for a few years until I ended up changing to math, and then I got involved with other things in life. I ended up in financial services, and I did some sales, which brought me around to this opportunity where I'm now helping people with their legal needs, and I'm ministering to communities, and all the things you said, all the wonderful things you said about me.
Well, they're all true, and it's interesting because when you said about aerospace, which I didn't know, I could see you on the Enterprise with Captain Kirk. And did you like that show when you were a youngster?
That was one of my formative influences. So yes, absolutely.
Okay, because I love that show. So maybe someday.
But the original.
Oh yes.
I'm old school.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And so now, how did you transition then from that and what you were doing into PPSLI? How did that happen?
Well, I was working with Mutual of Omaha. I was selling insurance for several years, close to a decade actually. And I found that many people didn't have their will. They did not have accountants. They didn't have access to legal things, and they didn't have the knowledge that they should have these things. In fact, I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
Well, this is the question I ask everybody. So typically when you ask a person if they have a will, typically they say, no, they don't have a will. The answer is you do have a will, because the will that you have is provided by the state. It's called probate. And what probate means is that the state they're going to take part of your estate, right? And they're going to liquidate it, and then they're going to parse it out amongst other people that you may or may not want to have.
And a will.
Exactly. So you need to have a will, and the thought that people have, I don't know why that is that it's impossible to get one, or it's thousands of dollars. With the Legal Shield plan, we're able to get them something very affordable. In fact, it's maybe $1 a day. Amazing.
Well, it's interesting. So probate is obviously something that our viewers would want to avoid, because then, they have actually no say in where their estate, where their funds, their life savings are going to. Is that true?
100%.
Wow.
Absolutely, because people don't realize that when their time comes, people will not look out for their interests once they're gone the way that they would have.
Right.
And you wouldn't have what's called control from the grave. And it could be, people will say, well, I don't have assets. Yeah, but you might have an heirloom. You might have a nice plate that has been passed down through generations. And, once you're gone, who's to say that this sister that you weren't that close with, or that family member doesn't, grab for the plate or the heirloom that you might want to have a child of yours have, or someone else. So it's very, very important, I feel, to have these things in place. Furthermore, even if you don't have a lot of assets today, you might have something tomorrow, and you might forget tomorrow to get that protection. Life is short, but it's also long. The idea is, life is short, and in a sense, life is short, but it's also very long too. And you don't know what can happen from day to day, from now until the end of your life. And it would just make sense to get a will. And we also do medical proxies, right? Another thing that's very important.
Interesting. Okay. So if someone is really ill and they're facing death, so you do that also.
Well, here's the thing. I say don't wait until you're facing death. Get it today, because you don't know when you might be, God forbid, in some kind of an accident where you are incapacitated and you cannot make decisions for yourself.
Right.
Right. People have the DNR, do not resuscitate, the badge or the bracelet. I want R, resuscitate. Under all circumstances, keep me on the machine. I don't care what is happening. You keep me on the machine. Period. End of story. So I think it's essentially important to have a medical proxy that you can empower someone that cares about you, one hopes, that will make the decisions that they know you would want them to make for you. A good example, what if you're in a condition that you cannot decide for yourself, and there might be an experimental treatment that needs someone to sign off on it.
That's right.
Right? So you want to have someone that understands your wishes and can go, yes, he would absolutely, or she would absolutely want to have this experimental procedure done or not, depending on your point of view.
That's right. Well, you know, I think it's very important because I've had experiences with people who I know, and someone in their family died. One was a mother, and she had lived in a house and for years hadn't taken care of it. It was really disheveled, the house, and horrible state. But when she died, there were 3 siblings. And, you know, the sibling who finally ended up with the house had to deal with the others, even though he really basically was the one who took care of took care of the situation, helped his mother during the years, and there was no real will. So what happened is they had to divide it between them, and you know, even though you would think you work it out very easily, many times I've seen and heard so many stories of how families start fighting with each other. So even just the fact of the person who is watching the show now, if you do this, it'll actually probably help to preserve your family unity because you won't have these siblings fighting amongst each other.
Right. All this unnecessary, contention and infighting that could have easily been taken care of with a simple piece of paper. I find it interesting. A lot of celebrities die and they don't have a will. You look at Prince and you look at all these different people who have, all kinds of money, and then you find out that there is no will. How do you have an estate that's worth millions and hundreds of millions of dollars without a will?
Right. Amazing, right?
Absolutely.
So then basically with PPSLI, that's what that's one of the services you provide.
Correct. Absolutely. We provide, the way I like to think about it is it's like a Swiss Army knife, right? Like something like a multi-purpose tool. People will say, well, I'm not breaking the law, right? I go, well, yeah, I mean, they actually, they will help you with that, but it's really for everyday use because there's so many things. We define a legal situation as one where if you had access to an attorney, the outcome would have been different.
Absolutely. Well, let me interject there because you're bringing up something, and I want to get into this because in today's world, there's been a lot of situations, obviously, in the last few years, and there's been over many years, where certain segments of the society have felt that they haven't been able to have access to equal justice, to an attorney. And so, I wanted to ask you, how do you, with your group, help to ensure that those people watching can actually get equal justice, get the legal advice that you need? So go ahead, and I'd like you to,
Sure.
Engineer, let's put the camera on Mr. Etta because it's important that they listen to him. Go ahead.
Well, personally, getting back to when I was at Mutual of Omaha, so I used to talk to so many people, especially older people, and I found that many people did not have these basic like the medical proxies and the power of attorney and the wills and so forth. So that I really saw a glaring need in that community, and there are many communities that are very underserved. And this gives me an opportunity to very affordably remedy a very large problem that's very easy to fix. Let's just say that. So I go to community organizations. I'll go. My team and I, we go to churches. We address the parishioners. We'll go to anywhere where the people are because that's the mission, to give people equal access to justice, because you only get as much justice as you can afford until now.
Well, you know what? That's when I heard about what you were doing, I knew that I wanted to have you on our show because the purpose of a Time for Truth show is to help the viewers and all the viewers, not just some, with the problems that we're encountering in today's world. And you know, your services are really going to be a lifesaver for some people. And I was going to ask you a different question.
Sure.
Because we have a lot of people out there who maybe have a small business, or they have a business, but after COVID, there's so many expenses that are coming in, and maybe their production hasn't been what they wanted to do. Their sales have been down. So I want to ask you is, because I see that you've had a lot of work with benefit coordinators,
Correct.
with H&R personnel, and in regarding employment and incentives. Tell us a little bit about what you do with that.
Well, that's a great question. So typically, you know, in this era, people, especially after the pandemic, you know, there was a lot of money, pandemic relief and unemployment and so forth. So it kind of, I think, broke people's willingness to go to work. So to this day, people, and if you speak to employers, even especially small business owners, one of the things that I hear across the board is that it's very difficult to hire people nowadays. One of my friends, he had the same complaint, that he wanted to hire someone and they wanted a good amount more than he was willing to pay. So I said, well, think about it. What they really want is a certain value, and the salary could be part of what you're offering them. Meaning, you can offer them a combination of salary and a nice, generous package of benefits like your life insurance and disability. And you can include a legal plan, which is a voluntary benefit. So there is zero cost to the employer, but the employee is going to pay as a payroll deduction about, say, $5 per pay period. And they're going to be able to access the plan, which gives them access to their own, not lawyer, but law firm. And they can call a lawyer and speak about any issue. It could be landlord-tenant, it could be a collections action, it could be a divorce, it could be speeding tickets, right? Anything. You know, I'll give you an example. I had a question about my lease where I live, and instead of guessing, stressing, Google, and asking people, I just called my lawyer, and they gave me a definitive answer, and that was the end of it. Not really a legal issue, but I wanted legal advice, and I was able to get a definitive answer, a clear, concise answer to something that was a problem in my life, and I was able to get it. So that's the kind of help that we're able, and I'm able to give through the plan. And as an employer, you can offer that to the employees at a discount off what's already an inexpensive price. The benefit to the employer, on the other hand, is if you have employees that have legal issues, and you know, in life happens.
Absolutely.
Right? Life does happen.
Right.
You know, if you have an employee that has to take time off to go deal with a legal issue, that is lost productivity for you.
That's right.
Versus if they have an attorney that they can send or just write a letter, make a phone call, dispense with the problem, that is not impacting your productivity. It's a win-win. So that's one component. The other idea is we talk about something called golden handcuffs. So what that means is if you make something so generous, it incentivizes the person to stay with you, and they would not leave because they would perceive leaving as them losing something. And if you provide such value, they will not want to leave you. It would be very hard to leave. And having a legal plan that they're paying $5 per pay period that gives them access to any kind of an attorney is really a nice way to tie down an employee. But in a quality way, very ethical, give them something of value that helps them, helps their lives, but also helps you.
It's a very innovative idea. You know, probably...
I wish I came up with it, but I have to thank Harlan Stone Cipher and PPLSI, of course.
Well, you know what he went through back then in '72 must have really been very difficult, because you think his life savings and an accident that he didn't even cause. It's bad enough having an accident. And so really, it's wonderful that he took, you and I were talking a little bit about that, is that he took a horrible situation and he actually used it, and he realized what should happen for everybody so they wouldn't go through what he went through. So, I really laud you that you're involved in this company. And probably there's people watching the show right now, so I wanted to ask you, are you willing, because there are probably viewers out there, you want to give them your email, but do you go out to different companies or people and speak with them, or are you willing to do that?
Absolutely. I feel like in terms of the mission, I go to where the people are. So wherever people are, I go to companies, I go to organizations. Typically, I'll do a presentation for a group of employees, and we will also do the enrollment. Also, it's a very quiet system, meaning we don't have to bother the employer. The employee does not have to get permission from the employer to use the service, and we don't ever have to bother the employer with any questions. Once the person says, yes, go ahead, that's the last they're going to hear from us, unless they want to use the service themselves.
Very nice. Now, and if the viewers out there want to get a hold of you, what is your email?
It's my first and last name together, so that's Brian, B-R-I-A-N, my last name E-T-T-A, E like Edward, T like Tom, A like Apple, or if you're old enough, the singer Etta James, just like that, Brian Etta at gmail.com. For those who would like to call, my phone number is 212-203-1273. Once again, 212-203-1273.
Excellent. So, I want to ask you, does PPLSI help companies or small businesses with like a group coverage, or are you involved in those things or not?
Absolutely. We will help you with your groups. We help companies from basically any size. I would say our sweet spot is probably about 20 to 100, but we can work with a smaller group. The definition of a group changed, so as long as there's an employer-employee relationship, that comprises a group. So it could be one employee, but in terms of our sweet spot, say about 20 to 100, which is not to say we cannot do over 100. It's just a bit of a longer cycle because you're dealing with more people, HR and different things. But we absolutely specialize and help the small business, because those are the people and the entities that really need help, especially coming out of the pandemic.
Right, absolutely. And does your company work with other facets of like healthcare or things like that, or are you basically in the legal shield and the identity shield?
While we offer legal services, and also we offer the identity theft as well. Basically, we have something called ID Shield, or the ID Shield, and what that does, that will help protect you online from getting your identity and your information stolen, and which is especially important if you have young children on the internet. That package includes reputation guard or monitoring. We will monitor your credit report, your important bank accounts. Basically, we monitor what's important to you. And we'll also give you a VPN and a password manager. But more to the point, if you ever have your identity stolen, we have a private investigator that will actually go and, fix this for you. And we will cover you up to, I believe, about $1 million if you experience any kind of damage due to being compromised.
Wow.
Oh, and of course, one other thing, when you have the two plans, those two things coordinate, the ID Shield and the Legal Shield, we give you credit counseling, where you can actually call a person and get help with your credit. And essentially, you can take the report from the ID Shield, have the lawyer take a look at it, and then they can write and contest erroneous issues and erroneous entries on your credit report. So we can even help to fix your credit.
Well, it's very important, because I can tell you myself, I think it was about 5 years ago, and it was unbelievable. It was a check theft. It was identity theft of a kind. What they did is somehow they made a check, which wasn't my check, but they made a check. They had someone taken a check that I had and somehow copied it and went to the bank and actually cashed it. It was $5,000. Yeah, it was, and it came onto my phone because I had the little messaging app in my phone from Citi. And so I saw that there, and I thought it was strange. So then I asked the person who does our books, and said, no, we didn't. So then I called the bank, and they gave us a number, and I said, but we haven't even got to that number yet. And luckily, the bank actually, and for those viewers out there, so they know, is that you should be covered for those kinds of things with your bank, because the bank is supposed to cover that. But to have your group behind them now, so for all these other aspects of life, because I've heard of some people, especially with Facebook and Twitter and being on Instagram, and I was recently talking to some friends that had different people that they knew that had gotten hacked. I'm curious, because I mean, you're dealing with this all the time. Do you have stories about this, or?
Oh yeah, in fact, the person who ended up getting me involved with the company, a person by the name of Fred DaCosta, we call him Mr. DaCosta. He is my mentor, and he basically changed my life, because had it not been for him, I would never have found this opportunity, which I find so gratifying. Basically, I'm able to help people and help myself, right? I earn a paycheck, earn a living, and I can help people. But yeah, we deal with this all the time, and the reason I bring him up, his story is that someone in his family, which at the time he did not know, has stolen his identity, and they bought all kinds of things, ruined his credit. So he got the ID Shield people to look into it, and then they found out, the private investigator found out that it was a family member, so they were able to take all the negative items and put it onto the other person's credit, which fixed his credit and basically exonerated him from all the problems that other party had caused.
Beautiful. You know what, I can see in today's world, with the craziness going on, that it really is going to help a lot of people. I want to ask you, we're running out of time, but I really want to ask you, because I see you're like helping people, and then I see that recently you also have gotten involved in helping youth and people in general with drug education. Is that true?
Absolutely. I mean, during the pandemic, the lockdown, people were stuck at home, and what do you do when you're home, right? It's very easy to indulge your vices. So, alcohol usage went through the roof, drug usage, and then people who might have been in a treatment program did not have access to help. So I think there were many people who might have died of, who could have otherwise been helped, who developed addictions that they would not have otherwise. I think it's very, very important to heal society. Life is not complicated, but it's complex, meaning that you have problems that are multi-layered, or they're different problems that a person can have, and you want to heal the person. So while I work with people about talking to them about their legal needs and getting them the service, and then I will maybe bring in some of the other people with whom I work who do insurance and financial services, I do feel it's important to talk to the human. And many people have some kind of an addiction, and I think if you want to have a functioning, well society, it's important to do that. And I think it's even more important to get that message through to the youth. It's easier to stop something, nip it in the bud, than to try to stop it once it has gotten acceleration and that train has already taken off. We don't want to get the train on the tracks.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you here on the show.
Thank you. My pleasure.
No, it's a pleasure to have you. And what I wanted to say to you is, what concluding statement would you like to leave the viewers with for this 2023?
Well, I would like to say this. To have agency, right, in your own life, to be able to act, to be able to perform, to have control, or even the feeling of control, right? You want to have agency, right? The ability to act on your behalf to get the things that you want. But to have the agency, right? There are times in life where there are third parties, there are entities, institutions that we don't have the power to reach, whether it's a municipality, a power company, the local government, the federal government, the PTA, what have you. And those are the times when we don't have agency. So for me, having advocacy, meaning a person or an entity who can advocate on my behalf and your behalf, it gives you back agency, which gives you dignity and allows you to function in life and feel productive.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, very well said.
Once again, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, no. You know what? I know it's going to help you. And now you have something. So if you said, geez, you know what? I wanted to have someone help me with this legal problem, but I had no idea. Or, I've been hacked. Oh my God, what do I do? Or I'm nervous. Now you have a solution. Thank you for coming on the show.
Such a pleasure.
Absolutely. And for those of you out there, we'll see you again on our next episode of A Time for Truth show. Have a very good night.
This show was sponsored by A Time for Truth Foundation Incorporated as a community service.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet